Dusty doom in Harmony Gulch. The sun, a malevolent eye in the vast, unyielding sky, beat down on Harmony Gulch. Dust, the omnipresent companion of the arid landscape, swirled in lazy eddies around the legs of the handful of spectators gathered in the town square. It clung to the rough-hewn planks of the makeshift platform, obscuring the faded paint beneath, and settled in a fine, gritty layer on everything and everyone. The air itself tasted of dry earth and resignation. On that sun-baked stage, 10 Romani women stood in a line, their shoulders slumped, their heads bowed. Their vibrant clothes, once a tapestry of rich reds, deep blues, and shimmering greens, were now dulled by travel and fear, stained with grime and sweat. Each woman held the hand of her neighbor, a silent pact of solidarity against the encroaching despair. Their grip was tight, a lifeline in a sea of uncertainty. Esmeralda, positioned near the center of the line, felt the rough calluses of her sister's palm against her own. Her gaze, usually sharp and observant, was fixed on the scuffed tips of her boots. The ground offered no comfort, only the stark reality of their predicament. A tremor ran through her, a mixture of dread and a fierce, unyielding anger that simmered beneath her quiet exterior. She could feel the stares, heavy and calculating, like physical blows. A man with a booming voice and a face etched with greed stepped forward. His red waistcoat was stained, and his slick-back hair gleamed with a questionable pomade. This was Silas Blackwood, the auctioneer, a man whose smile never quite reached his cold eyes. He clapped his hands together, the sound sharp and jarring in the oppressive quiet. "All right, folks, settle down, settle down." Blackwood's voice grated, cutting through the thick air. "We've got a rare opportunity here today, a real chance to turn your fortunes." He gestured broadly towards the women, as if presenting a prize herd. 10 strong, able-bodied women, ripe for the picking. Good stock, these ones, good stock. Esmeralda's jaw tightened. Good stock. The words were a brand, searing their humiliation into her very soul. She risked a quick glance up, her eyes darting across the faces in the small crowd. Mostly men, their expressions a mix of curiosity, disdain, and something darker, something predatory. A few women stood at the edges, their faces a mask of thinly veiled judgment. Blackwood launched into his spiel, his voice growing louder, more insistent. "Look at them. Strong hands, good backs. Perfect for mucking out stables, scrubbing floors, tending to the laundry, cooking, cleaning, child-rearing even. You name it, they can do it. These ain't your delicate city flowers, no sir. These are women built for work, built for purpose." He paused, letting his words hang in the air, allowing their implications to sink in. The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with the weight of their fate. Esmeralda could feel the collective gasp of her sisters, a silent shudder that ran through their linked hands. Their colorful garments, once a source of pride and identity, now felt like a uniform of shame. "They've been freed from their previous itinerant lifestyle," Blackwood continued, a sneer twisting his lips. "Now they're ready to contribute to honest, God-fearing communities. Starting bids will be low, folks, real low, just to get us going." He began to pace the platform, his heavy boots thudding on the wood, each step a drumbeat of their impending doom. "Think of the labor you'll save. Think of the tasks you can delegate. No more back-breaking chores for you, gentlemen. These women will take care of it all." Esmeralda's grip on her sister's hand tightened to the point of pain. She felt a burning in her chest, a desperate need to lash out, to scream, to shatter the suffocating silence with a defiant cry. But she knew such an act would only make things worse. She had to be strong, not just for herself, but for all of them. Her gaze met the ground again, but this time, it was not in despair. It was in contemplation. A quiet strength, honed by a lifetime of hardship, began to stir within her. Her eyes, though downcast, were already searching for an escape, a flicker of hope in the dusty doom of Harmony Gulch. The auctioneer's voice, a relentless hammer against her spirit, continued to drone on, but Esmeralda was no longer listening to his words. She was listening to the quiet thrum of her own resolve. A cowboy's kind heart. The sun, a fiery orb in the hazy western sky, beat down on Silas as he rode Star, his sturdy bay, into Harmony Gulch. Dust, fine as flour, plumed around Star's hooves with every rhythmic step. The town, a collection of ramshackle wooden buildings, seemed to shimmer in the heat, the air thick with the smell of horse, sweat, and something acrid, like burnt hope. Silas's gaze, usually fixed on the distant horizon, now scanned the bustling main street. Wagons were parked haphazardly, their beds overflowing with goods, and men, their faces etched with the harshness of the land, milled about, their voices a low, guttural hum. He steered Star towards the commotion near the center of town. A makeshift platform, crudely constructed from raw timber, stood stark against the backdrop of the general store. On it, a sight that made Silas's quiet heart clench, stood 10 women. Their clothes, though clean, were worn, and their faces, though beautiful in their own way, held an expression of profound weariness and barely concealed fear. Their eyes, dark and wide, darted amongst the crowd like trapped birds. A deep sadness, cold and heavy, settled in Silas's chest. He'd heard whispers on the trail, vague tales of misfortune befalling a group of travelers, but seeing them now, so vulnerable, so utterly exposed, was a different kind of ache. A man, portly and red-faced, stood beside them, a gavel in his hand. His voice, boisterous and grating, cut through the general murmur of the crowd, announcing the start of the proceedings. Silas dismounted, looping Star's reins around a hitching post, his gaze never leaving the platform. He pushed his wide-brimmed hat back slightly, a nervous habit he'd had since he was a boy. He wasn't one for crowds, preferring the solitude of the open range, but he felt an inexplicable pull towards this grim spectacle. The auctioneer launched into his spiel, a practiced patter about their health, their youth, their supposed docility. Each word felt like a stone thrown at the women, chipping away at their dignity. The bids began, low and uncaring, punctuated by the sharp crack of the gavel. Men in the crowd, their faces impassive, raised their hands, their eyes appraising the women like livestock. Silas's jaw tightened. He watched as one of the women, her dark hair falling across her face, flinched when a particularly lewd comment was made from the back of the crowd. Another, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, swallowed hard, her gaze fixed on the dust at her feet. A wave of righteous indignation, unfamiliar yet potent, surged through Silas. He had seen hardship, had faced down bandits and blizzards, but this felt profoundly wrong. To stand by and watch these women, stripped of their agency, bought and sold like chattel, went against every fiber of his being. He wasn't a rich man, not by any stretch, but his saddlebag held enough coin to keep him comfortable for a while. He hadn't come to Harmony Gulch with any particular purpose, just passing through on his way to greener pastures. Now, however, a purpose had found him. His hands, calloused from years of ranch work, clenched into fists. He didn't know how, didn't have a plan, but he knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in his bones, that he had to do something. The low, mocking bids, the calculating stares, the palpable despair radiating from the platform, it all coalesced into a single, undeniable imperative. He couldn't just ride away. His kind heart, usually a quiet presence, now beat a loud drum of determination against his ribs. He took a deep breath, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, then settling once more on the women. He had to intervene. The thought was a quiet whisper at first, then a roar. He had to. $3 silver. The sun, already past its zenith, beat down relentlessly on the dusty square. A thin film of sweat coated Silas's brow as he nudged Star forward. The mare, usually so eager, seemed to sense the unusual tension in the air, her ears flicking nervously. The auctioneer, a corpulent man with a booming voice and a stained waistcoat, was in the middle of his spiel, his words a rhythmic assault on the senses. "And a fine, strong pair of hands she has, boys. Think of the work she'll do. What am I bid, gentlemen? Who'll start us off at $5? Silas didn't hesitate. He guided Star directly towards the raised wooden platform where the first two women stood, their faces pale and etched with fear. The crowd, a mix of farmers, merchants, and a few rough-looking drifters, parted grudgingly as Star's hooves clattered against the packed earth. The auctioneer, mid-sentence, faltered, his eyes narrowing at the approaching interruption. "Hold on there, cowboy," the auctioneer bellowed, his face reddening. "Can't you see we're in the middle of business here?" Silas reined Star to a halt directly in front of the platform, the mare's breath puffing softly in the humid air. He didn't dismount, his gaze sweeping over the women, then the auctioneer, and finally the silent, staring crowd. His voice, when it came, was quiet, almost lost beneath the murmur that now rippled through the onlookers. "I'll buy them," Silas stated, his words cutting through the stagnant air. A collective gasp swept through the square. The auctioneer, initially stunned, recovered quickly, a sneer twisting his lips. "You'll buy them? And just who might you be, stranger? We're not selling horses here, we're selling assets. And you don't look like you've got 2 cents to rub together, let alone enough for a purchase of this magnitude." He chuckled, a harsh, grating sound, and some of the men in the crowd joined in, their laughter coarse and derisive. Silas ignored the jibes. He reached slowly into his saddlebag, his movements deliberate. The clink of metal against leather was surprisingly loud in the sudden quiet. He pulled out a small, worn leather pouch, untied the drawstring, and tipped its contents into his palm. 3 silver dollars, dulled by age but still gleaming faintly in the afternoon light, rested there. He held them up, his gaze steady. 3 silver dollars, he repeated, his voice gaining a quiet authority that silenced the last vestiges of laughter. "For all 10 of them." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the nervous shifting of the horses and the distant cry of a hawk. The auctioneer's jaw went slack. The women on the platform, who had been staring blankly at the ground, now looked up, their eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and a flicker of something akin to desperate hope. From the edge of the crowd, Sheriff Jeb Stone, a man whose presence usually commanded respect, if not fear, had been observing the proceedings with a growing sense of unease. His hand instinctively went to the butt of his revolver, his eyes narrowed, assessing Silas. He hadn't seen a move like this in all his years. $3 for 10 people was an insult, a provocation, or something else entirely. He watched Silas, then the auctioneer, then the women, a deep frown etched into his weathered face. This wasn't going to end quietly. "A deal is struck." A ripple of snickers ran through the assembled crowd, quickly escalating into full-blown guffaws. The auctioneer, a portly man with a florid face and a perpetually sneering grin, threw his head back and roared. $3 for 3 women. You hear that, folks? The boy wants to buy himself a bargain. He wiped a tear of mirth from his eye, his gaze finally settling back on Silas. "Son, you serious?" Silas stood his ground, unmoving, his gaze steady and unwavering. He didn't flinch from the auctioneer's mocking stare, nor from the boisterous laughter of the onlookers. His jaw was set, a faint tremor barely visible in his calloused hands, but his eyes, the color of deep moss after a rain, held a resolve that silenced the mirth in the auctioneer's throat. The man found himself unable to look away, a strange unease prickling his skin. Just as the auctioneer seemed poised to make another jest, a new voice cut through the lingering chuckles. "Hold on, Barnaby." Sheriff Jeb Stone, a broad-shouldered man with a weathered face and eyes that missed nothing, stepped forward from the edge of the crowd. His uniform, though dusty from a morning's ride, was crisp, and the star on his chest gleamed dully in the afternoon sun. He walked with a deliberate, measured stride, his boots thudding softly on the packed earth. He stopped beside Silas, his gaze sweeping over the women huddled on the platform, then back to the auctioneer, finally resting on the mean owner, Elias Thorne, who stood off to the side, arms crossed, a sour expression on his face. "Barnaby, the law's clear." Sheriff Stone's voice was a low rumble, carrying an undeniable authority. "A man can buy property if the owner agrees to the price. Doesn't matter if it's a horse, a pig, or... well, these women, provided they are legally considered property for sale, which they are under current statute. If Silas here offers $3, and Elias accepts $3, then a deal is struck. Simple as that." He eyed Elias, a silent challenge in his gaze. Elias Thorne, who had been watching the scene unfold with a mixture of annoyance and amusement, seemed genuinely surprised by the sheriff's intervention. He'd expected the sheriff to dismiss the young man, perhaps even chastise him for disrupting the proceedings. His sour expression shifted to one of mild confusion, then, as he considered the $3, a glimmer of avarice flickered in his eyes. It wasn't much, but it was $3 more than he'd been paid for them so far, and it was certainly more than he thought these particular wares were worth. He shrugged, a grunt escaping his lips. "Fine by me, Sheriff. $3 for 3 women. A fool and his money, eh?" He extended a hand, a grimy smirk twisting his lips. Silas didn't hesitate. He reached into his worn leather pouch, his fingers finding the 3 silver dollars he'd been saving. He placed them, one by one, into Elias Thorne's outstretched palm. The coins clinked softly, a sound that seemed to echo in the sudden quiet of the square. Thorne counted them quickly, then stuffed them into his own pocket without a word, turning away as if the transaction had been a mere trifle. The women on the platform, who had been watching the exchange with wide, fearful eyes, now looked at Silas, bewilderment etched on their faces. Their expressions were a mixture of apprehension and a nascent, fragile hope. Silas turned to face them fully. His voice, though quiet, was clear and resonated with an unexpected strength. He met each of their gazes, one by one. "You're free," he said simply, the words hanging in the air, a profound declaration in a world that had denied them such a basic right. "You are free. A new path, a new family." The auctioneer's final hammer fall left an unnerving stillness. Dust motes, illuminated by the late afternoon sun, danced idly in the saloon's air, indifferent to the monumental shift that had just occurred. The women, mere moments ago resigned to an unknown, terrifying fate, now huddled together, their postures no longer rigid with dread. A delicate, nascent hope began to blossom in their eyes, dispelling the wide, glazed terror that had previously consumed them. They cast furtive glances at Silas, then at each other, a silent query passing between them. Esmeralda, her usually keen gaze softened by the day's ordeal, took a small, tentative step forward. Her voice, a little husky from disuse, was nonetheless steady. "Sir," she began, meeting Silas's eyes directly, we thank you. But what now? What becomes of us?" Her gesture swept vaguely across the desolate saloon, then towards the dusty street visible through the swinging doors. This town, even in its current, fragile safety, offered no solace, no promise of a future. Silas, who had been leaning against the scarred wooden bar, straightened up. He surveyed the worn floorboards, the peeling paint on the walls, and the expectant faces of the women. Their gratitude was palpable, yet their uncertainty hung heavy, like a shroud. He turned his gaze towards the street, where a distant gust of wind stirred a small vortex of dust. This place, with its transient population and rough edges, was no haven for them. It was barely a haven for anyone. He envisioned his own ranch, miles away, nestled in a river-carved valley. A good place, fertile and tranquil, but achingly solitary. The image of his empty cabin, the silent evenings, the endless chores performed without a single shared word, pressed in on him. Loneliness had been his constant companion for years, a dull throb that had become as intrinsic to him as his own shadow. Yet, observing these women, their shared ordeal having forged an undeniable bond, he perceived not only their vulnerability but also a nascent strength, a collective spirit that could infuse his solitary existence with life. He drew a deep breath, the decision crystallizing in his mind with sudden, undeniable clarity, like water finding its path down a mountain. His heart, usually a quiet drum, began to beat with an unfamiliar, insistent rhythm. He looked directly at Esmeralda, then swept his gaze across the faces of the other women. Their expressions were a complex blend of apprehension and burgeoning trust. "You can't stay here," he stated, his voice deeper than usual. He paused, marshalling his courage, the immense weight of his proposal settling upon him. This was no trifling suggestion he was about to make. "My ranch, it's a good place. Land, water, a home far too big for just one man." He shifted his weight, his hands finding purchase on his belt. The words, once conceived, now felt utterly inevitable, unequivocally right. "You will be my wives. All of you. We will forge a new life together, on my land. A new home. A new family." A collective gasp rippled through the group. Esmeralda's eyes widened, a complex tapestry of shock, surprise, and a fragile hope flickering within them. The other women exchanged glances, some whispering, others simply staring, their faces a tableau of disbelief. Silas held their gaze, his own expression earnest, unwavering. He wasn't offering a temporary solution or a mere convenience. He was offering a future, a profound commitment born of empathy and his own quiet yearning for genuine connection. The silence stretched, pregnant with the enormity of his words, the future of 10 women and one lonely cowboy hanging precariously in the balance. The journey home. A hush fell over the 10 women, their eyes, wide with a mixture of disbelief and a flicker of hope, fixed on Silas. His offer, so unexpected, hung in the dusty air, a lifeline thrown into their abyss of despair. Esmeralda, ever the first to recover, studied him intently. She saw not the avarice of the men who had just bid on them, nor the cold indifference of the town. Instead, in his quiet gaze, she perceived a genuine kindness, a silent promise of protection. It was a gamble, but what did they have left to lose? "We accept." Esmeralda's voice, though soft, carried the weight of their collective decision. The other women nodded, a wave of relief washing over their tired faces. Silas offered a small, almost imperceptible nod in return, his lips curving in a faint, reassuring smile. Without a word, he turned and gestured towards the outskirts of Harmony Gulch, a silent invitation to leave their harrowing past behind. The sun beat down relentlessly as they walked, the parched earth kicking up clouds of fine dust with every step. The dilapidated buildings of Harmony Gulch slowly receded behind them, becoming a smudge on the horizon, then vanishing altogether. The air, once heavy with the stench of fear and desperation, gradually lightened, replaced by the scent of dry sage and distant pine. Silas walked ahead, his broad shoulders a comforting presence, occasionally glancing back to ensure they were keeping pace. He offered no conversation, but his watchful eyes missed nothing. The journey stretched on, days blending into a relentless cycle of walking, eating meager meals, and enduring cold, starched nights beneath a vast, indifferent sky. The land was unforgiving, a tapestry of sun-baked plains, jagged hills, and sparse, struggling vegetation. The women, accustomed to the vibrant, green landscapes of their ancestral homes, found the stark beauty of the frontier both challenging and strangely liberating. They clung to each other, their shared ordeal forging an unbreakable bond. Laughter, though infrequent, would erupt around their small campfires, a defiant spark against the encroaching darkness. They shared stories, whispered hopes, and silently mourned their lost loved ones, finding solace in each other's presence. Silas, true to his quiet nature, remained a man of few words, yet his actions spoke volumes. He always found the safest spots to make camp, sheltered from the biting wind or hidden from prying eyes. He shared his rations without hesitation, ensuring everyone had enough. When one of the women stumbled on the rough terrain, he was there, a steadying hand, a comforting presence. One evening, as the wind whipped around their makeshift camp, threatening to extinguish their small fire, he spent an hour meticulously building a windbreak of rocks and branches, his brow furrowed in concentration. Esmeralda watched him, a quiet admiration growing in her heart. He was an honorable man, a protector, unlike any they had ever encountered. She found herself observing his movements, the gentle way he handled his horse, the careful precision with which he built a fire. He was a man of the land, connected to the rhythm of the wilderness in a way that resonated deeply with her own spirit. The initial shock of their situation slowly began to give way to a cautious optimism. This journey, though arduous, was leading them somewhere new, somewhere safe. And with Silas by their side, they faced it not with fear, but with a burgeoning sense of unity and hope. The destination, his remote ranch, remained an unknown, but the journey itself was transforming them, forging them into something stronger, more resilient than they had ever been. Each step away from Harmony Gulch was a step towards a new beginning. Building a home together. The dust swirled around their wagon as they approached Silas's ranch, a modest collection of weathered buildings huddled beneath a vast, indifferent sky. A small, stoic farmhouse, its paint peeling like sunburnt skin, stood at the heart of the property, flanked by a sturdy barn and a ramshackle corral. The land, though flat and dry, held a quiet promise. Silas dismounted first, his gaze sweeping over his humble domain, then settling on the women in the wagon, a silent invitation in his eyes. Esmeralda, ever practical, was the first to move. She surveyed the farmhouse with a critical but not disheartened eye. "It needs attention," she declared, a faint smile touching her lips. The other women, energized by the prospect of a proper roof over their heads, sprang into action. Buckets of water were fetched from the well, scrubbing brushes appeared as if by magic from their bundles, and soon, the small house buzzed with activity. Cobwebs, thick as ancient lace, were swept away. Soot-stained windows were polished until they gleamed, letting in shafts of pale sunlight that illuminated dust motes dancing in the newly cleaned air. The women, working with a synchronized grace born of shared hardship, transformed the grimy interior into a clean, if still sparse, living space. Silas, initially hovering uncertainly, found himself drawn into their industrious whirlwind. He watched, fascinated, as Esmeralda, with a piece of salvaged canvas and a needle, began mending a tear in a tattered curtain, her movements precise and unhurried. He offered to haul away the accumulated debris, his strong hands making light work of the task. He watched as they unearthed forgotten tools, sharpened dull blades, and patched holes in the roof with surprising dexterity. The quiet ranch, once echoing only with the wind, now resonated with the murmur of their voices, the rhythmic thump of a hammer, and the occasional burst of laughter. The real transformation, however, began when Esmeralda pointed to a patch of sun-baked earth near the farmhouse. "We need a garden," she stated, her voice firm. Silas, though accustomed to the harsh realities of dryland farming, didn't argue. He brought a plow, breaking the unyielding soil, while the women, with their bare hands, sifted out stones and clods, preparing the ground with a reverence usually reserved for sacred rites. From their meager possessions, they produced packets of seeds, beans, squash, peppers, and even a few marigolds, treasures saved from their travels. They planted them with care, murmuring encouragements to the tiny dormant lives within. Silas, observing Esmeralda as she knelt, her fingers gently pressing a seed into the earth, felt a warmth spread through him. He found himself fetching more water, digging an irrigation ditch, and even fashioning a makeshift scarecrow from old clothes and a broom handle, an act that drew delighted giggles from some of the younger women. The garden, a vibrant patchwork of green shoots and hopeful blossoms, slowly began to unfurl, a defiant splash of color against the muted landscape. As days turned into weeks, the ranch began to feel less like a temporary stop and more like a true home. Silas, though still a man of few words, found himself communicating through shared labor. He taught them how to mend fences, how to handle the horses, and how to identify different types of wood for repairs. They, in turn, showed him how to infuse simple meals with unexpected flavors, how to mend torn garments with colorful patches, and how to find beauty in the simplest things. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, they sat around a small fire, the scent of wood smoke mingling with the earthy aroma of the burgeoning garden. Esmeralda looked at Silas, her eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "It feels right," she said, her voice soft but clear. Silas met her gaze, a rare, gentle smile gracing his lips. He nodded, unable to articulate the profound sense of belonging that had taken root in his quiet heart. Together, they were not just building a ranch, they were weaving a tapestry of shared lives, thread by precious thread. The dry land, once so desolate, now pulsed with the quiet heartbeat of a new beginning. Laughter fills the air. The scent of wood smoke and roasting meat, mingled with the sweet aroma of baking bread, now perpetually hung in the air around Silas's ranch. The silence that once dominated the valley was utterly shattered, replaced by a constant, joyous symphony. Laughter, bright and unrestrained, spilled from the cabin doors and echoed across the yard. Accordion melodies, sometimes mournful, sometimes vivacious, drifted from the porch at twilight, accompanied by the rhythmic tap of dancing feet and the occasional burst of tambourine. The women, each with their unique cadence and charm, had woven a tapestry of sound and life that was both foreign and utterly comforting to Silas. Esmeralda, often the conductor of this vibrant orchestra, would hum while kneading dough, her voice a low, melodious thrum. She taught the others intricate songs from their homeland, tales of sun-drenched fields and starlit nights, of love lost and found. Their voices, blending in a rich, spontaneous chorus, turned mundane chores into celebrations. Even the chopping of firewood became a rhythmic, communal activity, punctuated by playful banter and shared jokes. Meal times, once solitary and quiet for Silas, were now boisterous affairs. The long, rough-hewn table, which he'd built years ago with only his own hands for company, groaned under the weight of freshly cooked dishes. Stews simmered with unfamiliar but delicious spices, flatbreads baked to golden perfection, and vegetables, plucked from the small garden they diligently cultivated, provided vibrant color and freshness. The women, taking turns at the hearth, transformed simple ingredients into feasts. As they ate, stories flowed as freely as the river that ran through the valley. Tales of their travels, their families, their dreams, both grand and humble, filled the air. Silas, usually a man of few words, found himself drawn into these narratives, a quiet smile often playing on his lips as he listened. He learned of distant marketplaces, of intricate crafts, of enduring hardships faced with defiant spirit. He watched Esmeralda, her eyes sparkling as she recounted an amusing anecdote about a stubborn donkey, and felt a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the roaring fire. She was a storyteller, a leader, and a fount of a strength he found himself increasingly relying upon. He observed how patiently she taught the younger women to milk the cows, her hands gentle but firm, and how swiftly she could mend a torn shirt with a few deft stitches. Her presence was a steadying force, a quiet anchor in the delightful chaos. The ranch, which had always felt like a fortress against the world, slowly transformed into a haven. The women, once strangers brought to his doorstep by a twist of fate, were no longer faces he had purchased. They were individuals, each with a name, a personality, a history, and a future intertwined with his. He saw the way they cared for one another, sharing burdens and triumphs with equal measure. He witnessed their resilience, their unwavering spirit in the face of an uncertain future. Silas, the lone cowboy, the quiet rancher, found himself at the head of a family. A large, vibrant, noisy family, exactly the kind he'd never dared to dream of. He saw the children, born of these women and now running through his fields, their laughter echoing his own unspoken joy. They were no longer refugees from a troubled past, but pioneers forging a new life, bound not by circumstance, but by a burgeoning love and an unshakable sense of community. Their past troubles, though never forgotten, felt miles away, eclipsed by the warmth and light that now radiated from their shared home. A new dawn for the family. The sun, a benevolent eye in the vast blue, cast long, golden fingers across the ranch. The air, crisp with the scent of pine and rich earth, hummed with a symphony of contented sounds, the rhythmic clang of a hammer against metal from the smithy, the distant bleating of sheep, and the bright, clear laughter of children. Esmeralda, her sleeves rolled up, was kneading dough on a sun-drenched wooden table outside the main house, her movements fluid and practiced. Beside her, another woman braided sweetgrass, its earthy perfume mingling with the yeasty aroma of the rising bread. Silas, perched on the top rail of the corral fence, watched the scene unfold. His gaze, usually so intense and watchful, was softened by a quiet joy. He saw the easy camaraderie between the women, their hands busy, their voices a melodic counterpoint to the morning's industry. Children, a vibrant mix of dark hair and sun-kissed skin, chased a stray chicken, their giggles echoing across the yard. This was his home now, this bustling, vibrant place, forged from an auction block and an act of desperation. He hadn't sought a family, not in the traditional sense, but here it was, thriving, blooming in the harsh landscape of his solitary life. A profound sense of belonging, an emotion he hadn't known was missing until it filled him, settled deep in his chest. Later that morning, as the freshly baked bread cooled on racks and the aroma of simmering stew drifted from the kitchen, the women gathered under the shade of a venerable oak. Esmeralda, a colorful scarf tied around her head, began to tell a story, her voice rich with the cadences of her heritage. It was a tale of ancient Romani kings and queens, of journeys under star-laden skies, of resilience and the enduring spirit of their people. The younger women listened, rapt, some sketching patterns in the dust with their fingers, others simply absorbing the narratives that wove the fabric of their identity. "My grandmother taught me this song," one woman, her voice clear and sweet, began to sing, a haunting melody that spoke of distant lands and cherished memories. Others joined in, harmonizing effortlessly, their voices intertwining like the threads of a finely woven tapestry. They shared recipes for herbal remedies, techniques for intricate embroidery, and the meanings behind the symbols etched into their jewelry. The ranch, once a place of quiet solitude, was now vibrant with the colors and sounds of a culture embracing its new ground. Silas, observing from a respectful distance, felt a quiet pride swell within him. His silent ranch had become a crucible of new traditions, a testament to the power of acceptance. As evening painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, the family gathered around a crackling fire. The air grew cool, and the stars began to prick through the deepening twilight. Esmeralda sat close to Silas, her hand finding his, a comforting presence. "Who would have thought," she murmured, her voice soft, "that a dusty auction in a forgotten town would lead us here?" Silas squeezed her hand. "Life has a way of surprising you," he rumbled, his gaze sweeping over the faces illuminated by the firelight, faces etched with laughter lines and the quiet wisdom of hardship overcome. They had faced uncertainty, suspicion, and the vast unknown, but through it all, they had found each other. They had built not just a home, but a future, one brick of love, one thread of acceptance at a time. The echoes of their journey, once fraught with fear, were now transformed into a symphony of hope. This wasn't just survival, it was flourishing. They had discovered that true home wasn't a place on a map, but a feeling in their hearts, a shared commitment to a life lived with purpose and profound connection.